Call our last work session of the day to order. Nobody dancing as yet. Mr. Peterson, can you start with our roll, please?
Pete Peterson.
Patrick Flynn.
Elby Ray-Jones.
Dick Trainee.
Tim Skip.
Jonathan Johnston.
Bill Evans.
Bernie Hall.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Susan Mahoney.
Oh, Lucinda Mahoney, CFO.
Mark Marlowe.
Welcome. Lucinda, you asked for a couple of minutes to walk us through this real
Right.
quickly, so we're all ready for Tuesday night.
Right. I just wanted you all to have a little bit more of a detailed discussion about Mr. Marlowe's project. Our team did a very thorough review of the financials and the cash flow that he sent to us. He was able to meet the financial need test in that he was able to show that the tax abatement is the trigger to enable his project viable on a long-term basis. We also did financial analysis to determine when the tax abatement is done and the deferral period is done, which is 10 years and 5 years. And we wanted to be sure that the cash flow would generate enough money so that at that point in time, he would begin to be able to pay the property taxes. And this is so important in regard to what I was talking to earlier, in regard to did this particular project meet that financial viability test? And it does. And so, based on that, we did quite a long write-up in terms of sending to you what our analysis revealed. But also in regard to, is it the public benefit associated with this project? I mean, Mr. Marlowe plans to invest $28 million. And over a period of 10 years, we would do a tax rebate of $3.3 million. And then we would do 5 years of a tax deferral of $1.8 million. And so when I look at it from the perspective of the benefit, in regard to the need in our community for housing, Mr. Marlowe is going to bring additional housing to our community. His entire vision, which he will talk to you about here in a minute, is housing along with mixed use, and it will help, close some of that gap. So with that, I will just turn it over. That's the high-level finance perspective. I'll turn it over to Mark, and then he can talk about his project and the benefits to our community.
Before we leave the high level, Lucinda, you mentioned in our previous presentation concerns about recovery of CAP following an abatement. Does that affect this as well? So
Yes.
that is a larger issue we need to address.
And so if we go in and we make this is what I'm thinking, is if we go in and we make a change, what we should do is we should make it retroactive back to include Mark's project so that we don't lose that in the tax cap.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, thanks. Mr. Marlowe, welcome.
Thank you. Just a real brief history lesson and kind of a sidebar comment to give some real life perspective. This proposed resolution existed before in another number in 2009. In 2009, there was an ordinance brought forward, I believe it was AO 2009-139, which defined all that area north of 3rd Avenue, west of the Pioneer Schoolhouse, north of 3rd Avenue to the Bluff, west of Pioneer Schoolhouse, and east generally of Cordova Street as a deteriorated zone. And there's quite a bit of institutional memory left on the Assembly to remember public hearings associated with that designation, which is the designation required by state statute in order for a resolution to even be brought forward for consideration of an exemption and deferral. Subsequent to that ordinance being passed in 2009, there was a resolution passed by the Assembly for this same area to enjoy a 15-year package of property tax exemption and deferral. And this is a refreshing of that resolution. So we're not plowing new ground here. We just didn't get to plow the furrow yet. So that's just where we're at.
Dr. Seltrek's legislation, wasn't it?
Pardon me?
That was Dr. Seltrek's legislation, wasn't it?
She helped certainly with the language in the resolution. Yes.
What did you do?
And Sharon Weddleton wrote the original resolution for the most part. Just backtracking back to the south side of 3rd Avenue, just to give you a little real-life perspective, when the McKinley building when we redeveloped that project, there was not a tool in the toolbox to allow for the assembly to exempt property taxes because the property was deferred. The state, the city, the authority to collect or not to collect property taxes rests with the state of Alaska. And so there had to be a change to state statute in order for that to be brought forward. And I was instrumental in getting that done in the 90s. And then Alan Teshi and Dick Trady and others that I think were on the assembly at that time helped bring that legislation to be so that the McKinley building could enjoy a property tax exemption and deferral to help with its renaissance. Now, we can look backwards now and see actual numbers because that was kind of some of the questions that were coming up here. But in that particular building project, the city was collecting, at the time that was passed, about $8,000 a year in property taxes in that area. And to be fair to the analysis, the McKinley Annex wasn't producing any taxes because it was owned by the city at the time. I bought that building from the city when we went forward. But the property tax exemption on the tower went into effect in 2007 and on the annex in 2008. So the exemption and deferral package on the tower ends at the end of 2016, just a few short years away. And the first year that the city that the property will be back on the tax rolls will be 2017. So we were collecting about $8,000 a year historically in that area. The exemption or the deferral on the tower for this year is about $175,000, and on the annex is about $40,000. So in 2017, since 2007 on the tower, we've given up 8 times 10 is about $80,000. But in 2017, the treasurer would collect about $170,000 in revenue. And we got rid of a big bad eyesore down on the end of 4th Avenue and have provided a lot of housing. That tower and the McKinley Tower Apartments has not been below 97% occupied since 2006. So it's been a real success story, and that's a real life example of what this kind of tool can do. Now, specifically on this particular proposal, which is being refreshed, that area that I described, north of 3rd to the Bluff, west of the Pioneer Schoolhouse, and east of Cordova Street generally, has sort of been locked in time for about the last 60 years. Nothing really has been done there, except I believe the Archdiocese, maybe the Archdiocese and the John Thomas building have been built within that 60-year time frame. That's probably it. Maybe the Archdiocese office building was there 60 years ago. I'd have to take a look at a photo. But nothing's gone on there. And what our goal is to develop mixed use, but primarily housing in that area, high density housing that would, based upon the response to the market to the McKinley Tower, seem to be real popular. So that's our goal. This resolution is an effort to refresh that, the original language, so that you're assured that we aren't shifting burden to other parts of the community. And this resolution also has the same language. The way that the tax exemption deferral will work is that when the new construction occurs or the new development occurs, the taxes that the Treasury has historically taken in isn't going to change. In other words, on the footprint of the property where each phase happens, the taxes that historically has been collected is still going to be collected. It's just the improvement that's going to be exempt, so that nothing's being shifted to any other part of town. And then as the language that was originally offered allowed for a project to start within 36 months of August of 2009, and then every project or every phase in the zone had to be begun within 120 months of that date. So what this does, there's a few changes to it, not many, but the substantial change is the date. We're resetting it. There's still a 36-month fuse to get something going, and then another 120-month phase to see everything start within in the zone. But if you have the if it's in your decision to pass this resolution or approve the resolution, you can call on the real life example that the numbers can verify for what your predecessors did in 2000 and 1999, 2000.
Thank you, Mr. Marlowe. Mr. Steele has a question for you.
Yeah, is the way it was written back then and the way it'll be written now, is that a marketable something of value that it goes with the property as opposed to with the owner?
The way that the ordinance is, the statute is written, and the way that the code reflects is that any property that's been exempted, that's in a deteriorated zone that's been designated by the elected body as such, that exemption follows the buyer. A deferral does not follow the buyer. So in other words, if you had for instance, this is a 10-year exemption followed by a 5-year deferral, which is what the statute allows. On the McKinley Tower at the time, the statute only allowed a 10-year exemption and deferral. So in that example, it was 5 years of exempted followed by 5 years deferred. If the property is sold in the first year after development, the next 4 years are still exempt to the new buyer. But none of the deferral would accrue to the buyer.
Did you get the exemption for that 3 years or whatever it was that you were supposed to do the work? I mean, do you have to start the work?
Oh, no. This is all performance-based, so the exemption deferral doesn't ever begin until something happens.
Until you did something.
Yeah.
So the way we set this up is that he doesn't start to get a tax abatement until
Yeah.
there's a certificate of occupancy. And then that ensures.
Yeah, the abatement's all.
Yeah, that ensures that there is performance and we have the improvement. And I think
Yeah.
it's a really great.
And what's on the
great-
property right now? Is that vacant land?
There's some vacant lots, there's some old houses, there's a boarded up sixplex. There's still a couple old 1940s railroad
Yeah.
houses that are there on these little postage size lots. It's a scattering of various things.
Mr. Evans?
As I understood it, the abatement is only on the incremental
Yeah.
evaluation caused by the improvement, sort of
Yes.
what Ms. Mahoney was suggesting as an alternative for the redevelopment plan. So without improvement, there would be nothing to abate anyway, right?
Well, there's some tax that's paid on the properties he just.
But what you said is accurate. Without improvement, there's going to be no exemption or
It's
deferral
deferral
offered.
at this
Yeah.
point. Or would have been.
Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Anybody have any other questions before we wrap up? Mr. Trainee?
Mark, you promised to do some things with the McKay building. You did everything, so I look forward to supporting this.
Also gave you vertigo, as I recall.
Yes, well, quotation myself, we took the outside elevator up, and that was different. In fact, I still have a piece of stucco, that pink stucco on the top. And I took little pieces away with us when we went. But everybody said you couldn't do what you did. So I appreciate that. Look forward
Well,
to
this
meeting.
certainly was a valuable and required tool to have that accomplishment, but I have to say, for full disclosure, that, that building enjoyed a contingent of historic tax credits from the National Park Service, as well as the property tax exemption, and it took everything to make it all work at the end of the day, because that was a booger.
Would you remember all the radio announcers that said that thing will be nothing but a pig chicken coop forever? Pigeons.
That's what they said, but,
You proved them wrong, didn't
people
you?
walking in and out don't look like chickens to me.
I don't know. Nothing
A
else.
lot of scaffolding rental companies made a lot of money on that project.
That was just my personal stubbornness. And the reason for that is 9/11, because that scaffolding went up in the summer of 2001. And we started, part of the thing that we had to do, that the building department required us to do to make the building perform to the modern uniform building code structurally, was we had to excavate all the footings of the building and shear them off, and then put new footings on the outside that were about 3 times bigger. And, our financing was pretty much in the bag, before the 2008 meltdown and before 9/11, it was in the bag as much things are in the bag, But anyway, so we got started, good relationship with the general contractor, and off we went and spent a couple $1 million, and then all of a sudden, 9/11 happened, and that financing evaporated in 18 hours. So, the scaffolding was already up by that time, and I said, by golly, I'm not taking this thing, it's a step backwards.
Anybody else before we wrap up? Okay, well, thanks everybody. Get 15 minutes back for your day. We'll see you in about 45 minutes.